evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my very pleasant duty to perform a task which normally is performed by Dr. Isha Judge Ahluwalia in this Conversations on Urbanization series, which is to introduce the speaker. Normally she does the honors, but since she is the speaker herself on one of the many areas of her expertise, which is water, I'm really delighted that she has chosen to have this conversation with all of us and that she's here. So I won't say anything very much more, except that you can see that she's chairperson of ICRIER and also a member of the Water Advisory Group for the Asian Development Bank, and so truly qualified to speak on the subject. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it over straight away to Dr. Isha Judge Ahluwalia.
Well, friends and Mr. Sunit Tandon, thank you very much and welcome to this series. I must tell you that we decided last month that we must have a conversation on water, since water is in the headlines and it's on everybody's mind. It's something that we experience every day. And I reached out to Dr. Meher Shah, who is an expert on water and runs an NGO in Madhya Pradesh and was also a member of the Planning Commission. And he agreed to come and engage in this conversation. And then it turned out that he had another commitment in Kerala. I don't call myself an expert on water, but I have been studying urban issues, the challenges of urbanization, and particularly water and sanitation for the last 11 years. And since this is a conversation, I thought even a non-expert but a serious student of water could kick off the conversation. So let me begin with what has really energized everybody. We talk about water stress and water scarcity in India. But it's important to recognize that this water scarcity does not come from insufficient supply of water, but really arises from the way in which we source water, the way in which we conserve water or do not conserve water, the way in which we distribute and manage water. So this water stress is of our own making. I think first thing to recognize is that, and then we can think about how to respond to this challenge. About 80% of our water is used by agriculture in India. And it is used with a great deal of inefficiency, and I'll come to that a little later. So the largest sector, which is the user of water, uses it with an efficiency level which is estimated at something like 35%. By comparison, you look at Israel or Morocco, their efficiency in water use is 77%. So one clear indication is that if we could sort out the inefficiency in water use in agriculture, we will save a great deal of water and a great deal more will be available for other needs. Now, I said that we've been hearing about water stress and water scarcity. But even before it had hit the headlines, our own sources had sent out the signal some years ago. And what they said was that by 2030, the available water in India will meet only about half of India's demand for water if we carry on in the way in which we use water. So that's the background. I mentioned the inefficiencies in the use of water in agriculture, but increasingly there is evidence that in the urban sector, we are building up similar inefficiencies. So we are heading in the same direction in the urban areas as what we have been doing for decades in agriculture. I mentioned water efficiency, but another way of looking at it would be to look at water productivity. And what is water productivity? If you take GDP of a country and you divide it by the annual total freshwater withdrawal, you get a sense of what the productivity of water is. In India, it is 2.9. In China, it is 15, which means from the same amount of water, China gets 5 times as much GDP as we do. In Brazil, it's 32. In South Korea, it's 42. So that's, it gives you a comparative sense of where we are in our water efficiency or water productivity. But let's not go too far in the direction of saying that it's all agriculture that is doing it. Let's see what we can do to improve our lot with respect to water in urban areas. And let us see what is it that we are doing that is wrong. The first point to highlight would be that in many people's minds, they consider water as a gift of nature with a subconscious expectation that it should be available for free. Now, of course, water is a gift of nature in the form of rivers, lakes, water bodies, but water in the form in which we, living in cities, want is what now has actually got a slogan. It's Nal se jal, har ghar jal, right? That's what we want. That is not a gift of nature. For that, a whole lot has to happen before you have Nal se jal. First, you have to invest in collecting the water from a natural source, treating it to make it potable, investing in distribution networks of pipes so that you can, bring it to the level where households are connected with this distribution network, and also to invest in sewers, which is how the water, after it's used, is taken out. And this wastewater or sewage is then taken out in sewers, which means you need a sewerage network to take the wastewater to specific places where you then have sewage treatment plants. And after this wastewater is treated, you return the water to nature. So all of this requires investment in pipes, sewers, even I didn't mention stormwater drains. You have to make sure that the wastewater goes in sewers, but your rainwater comes in these open nalas or stormwater drains, which carry that water to the river bodies, back to nature. And the wastewater, which comes out in sewers, then is treated and then returned to water bodies. That's basically the whole cycle that you have if you are talking about Nal se jal. And also, I don't know, many of you are probably already aware that for every liter of water that you consume, there is 0.8 liter of water which is wastewater. And so when we ask for water to be delivered as Nal se jal, there is this 80% of that Nal se jal which has to be treated and safely transported and returned to nature. Only then we can have the sustainable flow of Nal Se Jal. The one thing that we have to be very careful about is that sewers which carry sewage or wastewater are always separated from the stormwater drains. Because if you have your open stormwater drains or covered stormwater drains through leakage or for whatever reason linking up with the sewage, then instead of carrying rainwater to the river bodies, to the water bodies, they will be actually carrying sewage. And this is actually not just a hypothetical situation. Those of us who live in Delhi know for a fact that a whole lot of open nalas that we have are actually carrying sewage. In fact, a whole lot of them are being used as solid waste dumps. People put garbage in there. And when the rain comes, these nalas turn into sewers. Or in other situations where you have sewage treated at one point and then it's being carried to the water body, instead of carrying it all the way to a water body, very often the treated sewage is discharged into an open nala, into a stormwater drain. So it mixes, the treated sewage starts flowing with stormwater drain, and then a few miles later, sewage comes into this open nala. So you are doing the work, undoing it, doing it again, undoing it. And this is actually, this has been documented. You had Professor Gosai of IIT in these conversations. We've had him twice. He, with his team and 300 students, actually went about Delhi to look at what the drainage system, how the drainage system was working. And he showed us pictures here on how the sewers and the drains were all working together to create the chaos, that we have. So what we are doing in this manner is, what ought to be our catchment areas for rainfall, whether these are lakes and rivers or our nalas, are actually being contaminated. So we lose the use of these catchments. And today, rightly, the government is saying we should all be doing rainwater harvesting. Yes, we should be doing rainwater harvesting individually and collectively. But along with that, we must see to it that our original catchment areas that we have, they also remain uncontaminated and we can use them. Because, very often when we talk of water supply, typically you will hear people talking of the distribution network of pipes. And then they will say, oh, our sources have dried up, or our sources, the bulk sources have become contaminated. So let's look for a clean source 50 miles away, 100 miles away. So you lay pipes and you try and reach out to newer and newer bulk sources. But what you have within your city, even take the case of Bengaluru, you have the lakes that are being encroached upon. This is the story of every city of India. So we are actually contaminating, covering up our catchment areas, and then hoping that somehow by just getting pipes laid to our homes, we will get safe and clean drinking water. Now, I think one of the problems is that, before I get there, let me also say something else, that if there is very little information available on how many people are connected to pipe network, what is the supply of water that you get every day, what is the water resource that is available to a city. And based on whatever limited evidence there is, not terribly reliable, but let me share that with you. For India as a whole, 53% of the households are connected to a piped network. The others are relying either on groundwater or buying water from tankers, and usually these are the poor who, because they are not connected, they don't have reliable supplies of water, they have to buy water from tankers. Average supply in an Indian city is about 2 hours per day, about 1 to 6 hours every third day. These are the figures that we have received from the Ministry of Urban Development's survey in the cities. In China and Brazil, by contrast, water is available 24/7. The average availability of water in Indian cities is about 69 liters per day per person. Delhi is hugely pampered. The average availability in Delhi is about 205 liters per capita per day. What has happened is, in this sort of a scenario, most people, when they face a decline in public service delivery over the years, they have found private solutions. So sometimes I go to colleges and I'm talking to students and I ask them, how many hours do you get water in your homes? Many of them believe it's 24/7, and that's because they have an underground tank and they have a pump, and they've converted this very infrequent supply of water into 24/7 supply by private investment. So as everyone has found, or as many people have found private solution, there's been an apathy to the decline in public service. Today, things have become so bad that these private solutions will not help, and we need to think collectively and find what the solution is. So let's come to what is the role of prices in all this. As I mentioned to you, if you have to make all these investments to give Nal Se Jal, then somebody has to pay for those investments. And even if, let's say, the government pays to put the infrastructure in place, the operation and maintenance of this infrastructure has to be recovered from a user charge. Ironically, today, many in the middle classes are willing to pay. They are so frustrated and fatigued with the water problem that they say, okay, we will pay to cover the user charge, but very often to cover the operation and maintenance costs. But very often the politicians are reluctant to charge. So we need to break this thing and this resistance and get people to understand why you need to price water. You need to price water to recover the cost to some extent. And also you need to price water so people begin to conserve water. They don't treat it as a free good, and you have a misuse of water. As long ago as in 1992, there was a government committee headed by Vaidyanathan that had recommended that you should have pricing for water which grows with how much you, the more you consume, the higher the price. It's called volumetric pricing. And the water policy of 2012 reaffirmed that and said that we must do that. But there are hardly any cities. There may be one or two where this is practiced, but we do not really go there. One solution that I put before you is to have an independent regulatory authority, a statutory independent regulatory authority which will set the price of water, which will transparently share with the public how this price is arrived at, and then the government has no say. The government has to accept the price that is set by the regulator. And if the government wants to subsidize a particular group of consumers, they can make a direct transfer to those consumers, and they make a provision in the budget, and they say, okay, we are spending this much money to subsidize such and such group, but the price and costing is transparent and known to all. Because then, you know, we can also make a scrutiny of whether the cost elements are correct or not. How much of it is genuine cost and how much of it is inefficiency. So one thing I would say is that which we have to look at. And the last point that I will make is about groundwater. In the rural areas, we have increasing use of groundwater because we have made electricity free for farmers, and it's easy, and the irrigation water is scarce and the irrigation canals don't work. So it's easier to go deeper and get water from the ground. And we've actually had a situation where in a number of states, the water table has really been declining. Then you have, here we go. India is the largest user of groundwater in the world. And the water table in Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, and Delhi has declined at the mean rate of 4 centimeter per annum. And I think this is very, very important. In the cities, people are also turning to groundwater because those who are not connected, either they have bore wells and they use groundwater, or the poor rely on buying from tankers who are tapping it legally or illegally from the groundwater. So we end up having overuse of groundwater, and as we go deeper, we get arsenic and all kinds of things mixed in water, which is not good for our health. So basically, what we need is a financially and environmentally sustainable solution for water. And for that, I would say that there are examples within India only. We don't need to look only at Singapore. Incidentally, I had asked the organizers to circulate a column that I had in the Indian Express on the Singapore way of handling the water challenge. If you just Google my name and say Indian Express, there is the whole Singapore thing which is spelled out. I don't want to take more time. And people would normally tell you that Singapore is a rich country and Singapore is a disciplined democracy. We are neither. So Singapore's way is not our way. But we do have cities in our own country which are following along that path and doing very well. Today, the one city which is better than any other city in responding to the water challenge is Nagpur. And then, of course, you have some small towns in Maharashtra, Malkapur, Amravati, who are also giving 24/7 water. In Bangalore, they have tried. In Hubli, Dharwad, Gulbarga. It is not rocket science. It's really basically approaching the problem in a holistic manner. So let me leave it at that, and let's get on with comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. My name is N. Bhattacharjee. I've been working with World Bank in the urban sector for quite some time. What comes to light through these salient points that you have made is that the ultimate villain is the issue of governance. Now, as you said, willingness to charge is an issue. And managing water, there are various issues in terms of recycle, reuse, in terms of conservation, in terms of managing the water system, and therefore, as you rightly pointed out, this issue of an independent regulator. Now, this discussion has been going on for the last 15 years. And the independent regulator for water and sanitation was something which we had at one point of time very strongly discussed with the ministry also. There are few problems in terms of independent regulator that you cannot have one regulator throughout India, so it has to be really state specific. However, the state specific regulators also need to have a certain baseline or benchmarks, for which a benchmark has been already developed in terms of water sanitation services. But the conservation of surface water, and we still, in major cities, we still depend up to 70-75% on groundwater. So obviously I have seen myself 40 years back in Delhi, the water used to be pumped out and actually thrown away. And today you have to go 300 feet to get water. So the conservation water recharging is a major issue which has to come through the town planning, building laws, by regulations, and sort of ensuring that this happens on the sanction of a plan at any point of time. But the urban side of the story, in terms of water management, I think one major issue is willingness to charge, and second issue is capacity to manage a water system within a local government, the third tier of government. So again, the capacity for local government, the financial management and resources at local government level to manage this. And third is the willingness to charge and to know actually what is cost of supply. This is completely hypothetical charge that water is charged in most of the cities in India. Actual cost per liter may be very different. So I think in rural side, one point you made very, very important, I think, in terms of making electricity fee, and that actually allows people to draw more and sort of waste also. But in terms of urban, I think the overall revamping of the urban management is probably one of the ways to go. Thank you.
Thank you. May I just request that where you agree with me, ignore that. I would like you to highlight where you disagree with me, because then that way we'll get more comments in place. Please.
I'm Ahluwalia, dealing with water for the past 70 years. So I have seen it in various forms and ways of being used. You have very rightly said there is no shortage of water, as he also said. I entirely agree with it. I'll tell you how. The question is, if you see the precipitation charges for the last 100 years, you will find in that up till now, the difference is hardly 2 to 3%. What goes wrong is, after that, when it passes through the area of the forest and the mountains, where it gets dirtied, as you already said, and purity is not preserved. So that is where the water is lost. And one of the basic reasons is the forest, which is never talked about, never blamed for. I tell you why. After the 80s, they decided to make the forest as an income growing objective. So therefore, they changed the biodiversity and made it a single crop like pine and all those. And that hardens the soil, therefore it does not go down to the groundwater. That is where you lose the groundwater during the monsoon, which used to come out during the lean season much later. Secondly, after this, they have the purity of the water as has been sewage and all those things, both in agriculture and also in urban areas, has not been treated for the past 30 years. And you are very right, it is only recently in the past 1 or 2 years that some work has got started and being done seriously. That's another factor. Then the forest is never blamed, they never accept. If you talk to the research people of the forest, various institutions, you will come to know what we are saying is really correct, and the groundwater gets stopped. Therefore, the intensity of flooding increases, and you get more water during the for flooding in the past few years. You have seen it both in the towns and also in the villages and all those places. So these are factors which are not even receiving the attention. Little part has been receiving and they are already doing it, but now the first part has also to be seen, that all the water that we get, water harvesting, let us not call it only water harvesting, let us talk it rain harvesting. So every drop which drops on the ground, any part of the ground, we should be able to collect. That part is still missing. We only collect it in the houses at some places and in agriculture at some places where there is no monitoring. The laws are there, but they are not fully implemented. So the basic point which he raised was governance. We don't have the technology at the lower level. If you go to the panchayats now, you will find that they want integrated system of water use, that is rainfall, surface water, the small tanks, and also groundwater. And groundwater should be the last one. Now, how do you do that? Not by pricing. It has to be regulated. And regulation has to be in a manner that it is equally distributed all over whatever is available, so that you can then do that. I have done the regulation of water where the price was 0 in Thailand, and you could get save water and you get most efficient use of water by the farmers themselves.
Thank you.
That is, those are the things which need to be, further extended to where attention is required. That is why I suggested these things.
Good evening, ma'am. Firstly, thank you for your informative lecture. Yeah, my name is Srijan, and I have a very specific question for you. That, as you know, that as per a recent Niti Aayog report, 21 cities would run out of groundwater by 2020. So I wanted to ask that, is there, and the government has formed a water resources ministry, so is there a reasonable action plan through which we can recover some of this groundwater, or would all of us be running helter-skelter 1 year from now? Is there some hope, or have we missed the bus already?
My name is Abhishek, and this is not a question, but this is just a point of thought for everyone. You talked about water availability. I also wanted to highlight the flip side of it with the context of recent Mumbai flooding. So Mumbai, as we know, it's a coastal city. It has a lot of estuaries and mangroves, but all of them have been concretized. Reclamation work has been done in past several years, which has resulted into no way for water to go to drain properly, and it's flooding the part of city. So is governance, or are urban people ready to say at one point that, okay, we don't want concretization, just remove that concretization, we will revive those estuaries, we'll revive those mangroves, we'll revive those lakes, let the water go, let our houses stop getting flooding.
Just 2 points. Thank you. Just 2 points. I think lot of things.
You introduce
I'm
yourself.
Dr. Ramachandran. a lot of things can be done in small ways by the civil society, welfare associations in their respective colonies where they're staying. By advocacy, by through discussions, putting systems in place, and also calling experts and talking. I mean, this is like a system. And where there are violations, I think these societies should be in a position to make corrections and highlight the violations as well. The important aspect I wanted to share with you here is connected with Jal Board. Now, Jal Board initiated 3 years ago a plan, identified 3 areas in Delhi for 24-hour water supply. And Saket was one such locality area. And network distribution of pipelines, and there a lot of work. And we were all excited, I'm from Saket, that something great is going to happen. So when actually it came for execution, it's a socio-cultural issue, ma'am, actually. Because when actually it got executed, initially we were having tanks, you know, where the savings of water was saved and that is used. Now, 24-hour water supply means they will say, okay, there is no savings required, so remove your tanks, not required, and then you will get a regular supply. Now, there was, you know, people were forgetting to close the valve, or the system was not working. There were continuous flow. Bills were enormous bills they were receiving because people were not able to manage the 24-hour water supply. Then the people of the colony, and one of the blocks where they experimented, they themselves said, we do not want 24-hour water supplies. Please supply 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. Today, that's the situation. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, my name is Binan Nandramam. Actually, ma'am, I come from Manipur. I come from a small village from Manipur. Ma'am, talking about the agricultural and water availability, like in Manipur, people are not aware about any such thing. So, like, this is a simple question to you. Like, is there any program or projects undertaken by you, like, in the near future? It will be a very helpful, or people are not aware about such conservation of waters and management of sewage and all those sanitation. Like, from my point of view, like, if you're doing such jobs in whether in Northeast or particularly in Manipur, it will be great helpful to the even for the country. So in our
Hello, good evening. My name is Som Chaturvedi. I have been associated with this problem for the last 2 years, just out of curiosity when I found the water crisis is becoming so severe. What amazed me was an average person does not know there is a problem. You talk to an average person, if there is a problem because he gets water, he gets, you see, in the tap and all that, so he is not aware that there is a crisis. Now, on macro level, you see on any level, this is an issue. And the solutions are very complex, very difficult, because they are climatic, there are many, habit making and all that. Now, one thing which I found a common denominator in my opinion, which I want to submit to you, then since this affects the entire humanity, the entire population, everyone, the boond will bhare talaba, if you draw, just collect it, it leads to that. My study is that the lack of awareness is the most difficult reason leading to this problem. If we are aware, both in terms of conservation as well as preservation, the problem can be handled much better. It cannot be handled by government, by, making a Jal ministry or things like that. It is when every one of us contribute, then only it can be solved. It will be solved when we educate the children in the school. What is this problem? When we tell the housewife, what is this problem? In the rural areas, when we tell the farmers, what is this problem? So in my opinion, the beginning will be by creating an awareness among the people. Solutions are very complex, very difficult. Everyone has a solution. but this basic common denominator, in my opinion, is something we must try to do.
Thank you. Are there? Yeah, please.
Thank you, ma'am, for your very informative lecture on this water problem. I am Naz Asghar. I am editor of a news website, India News Stream. Actually, I am just going back to the issue of concretization this young man had raised. It's really a very serious problem in urban areas, and slowly it is percolating down to rural areas also. I mean, there is no kacha land left. Suppose somebody is constructing a building on 100 or 200 square meter. I mean, should there be any law that it should be made mandatory that you have to leave out some kacha land when you construct a building, like it is in other countries, in foreign countries? Because if there is no kacha ground, of course, the water recharge cannot take place.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Tanya. Thank you for the really good lecture. I just want to flag two issues, please. One is, in reference to what everyone has said, recharging the aquifers. We have so much development in material science. So even when we've got pavements and, development projects happening for urbanization, can we not have materials which will allow some sort of porosity so it can sort of help to recharge the aquifer, especially in urban areas? And secondly, I know it's not that far in the future, but dry compost toilets, especially in larger buildings, because you see, each time we flush at home, we can be fairly conservative with our flushing. But public loos, everybody flushes after each use. So some sort of awareness on that.
Partha, do you have any wisdom to share with us? No? As I said, this is actually... Oh, sorry, I can't see you. Yeah, please, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you very much. It was very useful information, and generally agree with whatever you have indicated. Only one or 2 points I would like to suggest. One is utilization. I think that is the area which is more feasible to handle. For example, in certain foreign countries, we have seen that in schools, the point of attention is schools. Children, they are told they take 1 cup of water and use that only in the morning for brushing and everything together, because they just open, they are just sleepy, it goes on flowing. So I think, and another thing, for families, for example, select a set of families. Tell them these are the ways in which you can reduce utilization or conserve within the family. And show them after 5 months, 6 months, how much their water bill is coming down. I think once you have some set of families they will be just showcased to others to show. And a third point is regarding data. So you have given some data, people are a bit aware of that. Information, when the authorities, they just know how much water is wasted, how much is and what is going to happen. Broad ideas people have. When it is given in concrete in this particular area, I think once that is there, staring at them, and also take advanced action rather than after 20, 30 or 35 what happens. People, because you don't get credit for solving a problem which is going to come. That is happen. That is selfless service. If you solve a problem which is there, then everybody praise you. But a problem which is in the making, if you solve in advance, I think that type of a database building and making it available.
Thank you. Could you introduce yourself, please? Because
I am Augustine Peter. I used to be a government official. Now I'm retired.
So I think, Mr. Banerjee, I agree with everything that you have said. And one important dimension which I had not highlighted, which you did, and then several speakers did that, was that at the time of sanctioning the plan, we should see to it that a number of conditions are met which lead to water conservation. I completely agree. You are absolutely right in what you said about forests. I think actually that was one part which I had not touched upon at all. But I was not aware of what you pointed out, the change in the law in the 1980s, which, yeah.
You see contradictory things. We have environment, climate change, and forest. All three are doing different things, yet they are different in one ministry. How can you get projects passed or developed through professionals without sitting down together and finding a best way balance out of it? And you have seen so many ministers changing in the last 30 years on this subject.
Yeah.
So that is very really required. Our thinking has to change.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was a very important intervention, and I certainly learned from that. You asked about Jal Shakti. You know, when I heard reference to a holistic way of looking at water, the Ministry of Jal Shakti being created, immediately the thought that came to my mind was Singapore, where they have a public utilities board, where all aspects of water management are looked at together and then implemented. I went to the net to see what was happening, but actually it's too early to tell. Right now, all they've done is they've merged ministries, but then what all I have heard focuses on Har Ghar Jal and Nal Se Jal. So it's kind of raising expectations, and it's talking about the need for infrastructure so that we can give Nal Se Jal. But I think Jal Shakti ministry should sensitize the public, make them aware of what other things have to fall in place for your piped infrastructure to deliver safe drinking water. In Singapore, you know, I followed what happened in Singapore very closely. And I remember on one occasion, I was at what they call the Singapore Forum. They have an annual meeting. And I had the opportunity to ask the Prime Minister of Singapore in a large seminar of 300 people. I said to him that, you know, you charge for water at the marginal cost. You know, they are not only charging to cover operation and maintenance costs, they are not only charging to add to that depreciation and interest so that capital cost is also incorporated, but they started charging in the 1990s for new water, which is the water that they created out of wastewater through, you know, wastewater treatment. They came up with what they call new water, which meets all the WHO standards of water that you should be drinking. And then when they found even that was not enough, they went for desalination. And today, since desalination is the most expensive form of getting water, every Singaporean who drinks water pays the price which is equal to the cost of the next liter of desalination. So I said to him, you know, when I go and talk to local governments or state governments or people in India, I say, try and recover operation and maintenance cost, because our municipalities don't have the money even to do the investment of pipe network, but at least for maintenance. So I said, is there something wrong with what we do? And you know what he told me? He said, in 1971, when we started working on this, we were recovering operation and maintenance cost with the price. Then a few years later, about 10 years later, we started full cost pricing, capital recovery of it. And it was only in 1999 then they started doing marginal cost pricing. And what is more, they put a water conservation tax that if you use more than a certain amount of water, you are taxed on water. So, you know, you talked about regulation. I mean, of course, regulation is good, enforcement is more difficult, and you need community engagement for even regulation to work. But then there is another kind of regulation that comes from the market if you begin to price water. And you can make a certain lifeline supply free. But beyond that, you must charge both to recover costs. So that would be, you know, my answer to what Jal Shakti should be sensitizing people, that you need solutions which are financially sustainable. Otherwise, nal ke jal ke liye aap network to laga doge, but it'll just, you know, for lack of maintenance, where will the funding come? So it'll just go down. So I think, I'm hoping that as this ministry takes root, that they will be looking at that aspect. And, you know, quite correctly you pointed out, again, you know, Singapore has the high-tech solutions, but they equally emphasize the very low-tech common sense solution. Their slogan was, catch every drop of rainwater that you can, claim it and keep it, and reclaim every drop of wastewater. And then they would say, add to that, you keep your drains separate from sewers. If you can do that, you will get your catchment areas, which will be clean. In fact, when they started out in 1971, their Stanford Canal and Singapore River was highly contaminated. But then they worked on it and cleaned that basic source. Of course, you will say it's a small place, but we can start in a small place in one town. And we've done it in some cities, as I said, in Malkapur. And Maharashtra tried to do it through the Maharashtra Sujal Nirmal Abhiyan. But then after a few years, the thing just, you know, dropped. And I think that's what we need to take care of. Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Mumbai flooding, you are absolutely right. I mean, Chennai flooding was the same thing. It's the other side of the coin. You know, if you encroach and, you know, you contaminate your water, and one thing I have not mentioned, which I'm sure all of us are aware of, is the public health hazard of all this. I think if for no other reason, for that we should all wake up. That we need to really fix this problem. Again, concretization, there has to be a rule and we have to take care of that. Resident welfare associations have a very major role to play, and I know that you are playing that role really brilliantly in Saket. But you know, I am disappointed to hear what you tell me about 24/7 experience in Saket, because I have visited Trichy, where in the slum areas, they've given 24/7 water, and I've also been to Hubli Dharwad, where I've been to very poor areas where 24/7 water has gone. Their water bills have come down, their water consumption has come down, and the pressure with which the water was coming in those taps was much better than the pressure I get in my tap in Delhi. So I think what these instances show is that it is doable, but very often governance comes in the way. And,
actually, that was the premise on which they started. That if you have 24-hour water supply, you will save water. Absolutely correct.
Yeah. You know, from Manipur, you asked the question. Now, as I was talking to some friends and pointing out that, you know, when people come here, sometimes they say, why don't you become an activist? Why don't you tell us what the solution is? The truth is, we don't know the solutions. We are all grouping. We are sharing our knowledge and our experience and our understanding and hoping that we'll get somewhere. But today, the tool is really in the hands of the young people. You know, through the internet, you can have YouTube demonstrations of what is happening, where things are working, and then, you know, we can only publicize that through websites and all, that this is possible. Now, you guys are much better adept at doing that than our generation. We are just trying to bring about awareness and raising consciousness. But I completely agree with you. In fact, that reminded me what you said. You know, when I do a monthly column on urban issues, and I was writing quite a bit on solid waste management. And on one occasion, about 10 years ago, I had the then Chief Minister of Assam running into me at some function, and I was surprised to see that he came up to me and he said, you know, I read your column on solid waste management in Pune, and I visited Pune to see how they were doing it. These were the biomethanation plants. And you'd be happy to know that now we have 3 such plants in Guwahati. I mean, he was talking at that point. That energized me, and we said, okay, from ICRIER, let us take a workshop to the Northeast. So we invited people, officials and others from all 7 states there, and we showcased where solid waste management was working. That was much before Swachh Bharat. So I think each one of us has to try and do what we can and hope. The good thing is that the government is actually emphasizing the importance of this. But the sad thing is that they are not doing it in a holistic manner. And these problems cannot be solved unless you look at them in a holistic manner. So we have to somehow see to it that they move towards a holistic solution. Then lack of awareness, I've already spoken. Town planning, I completely agree. Town planning has a very major role to play in seeing that we don't have encroachments, that, you know, we can contribute towards protecting our catchment areas. Tanya, your point about use of materials with porosity, I think that's a very, very important point, but it's kind of more on the R&D front, more futuristic. And I think definitely, you know, we should do that, as we should also do, you know, dry toilet things. But in many ways, we also have to change our ways in everyday functioning, as, you know, we've gathered from all the comments. But I completely agree with you. Then you talked about utilization. Yes, I think demand management, you can call it, or emphasizing, maybe in schools. Actually, schools are the right place to begin. I speak quite often at schools and colleges, and I find that it's more exciting to speak to school students because, you know, they are not set in their ways, they are beginning. But by the time they come of age, you know, we'll run out of water. So I think we need to also educate ourselves. You know, I remember in 1997 or so, I saw a Pakistani play in Delhi, and it was about, it was a Multani play about a village where there were sort of wars on water. And the village Shah, who was the owner of the well, was called Kuwe Shah di Sarkar, meaning he was referred to as the king of the well and his government. And in fact, God was referred to as Vadi Sarkar, but the Sarkar that really ruled, the local government there, was the Kuwe Shah ki Sarkar. So I think unless we find ways of pricing, regulating, changing our ways of you know, dealing with this water challenge, we might end up having kueshas all over the place, and then it'll be too late to go back. But I would not like to end on a negative note, but to say that already in India, there is Nagpur that has made a huge march. There is these 3 cities in Karnataka where they have 24/7 water. There are small towns in Maharashtra. And you know what? We always tend to look at Dhaka in the capital of our next door neighbor as a basket case, but Dhaka has transformed its water scenario and they are giving 24/7 water. And again, there's a column that I wrote on this. I would urge you to read Singapore at one end and Dhaka at the other end to see what is possible and how we can really transform the water scenario. We just need to collect knowledge, disseminate it, reach out to the younger generation, change our ways, be part of the change that we want, and then we can avert the crisis which is literally knocking at our door. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ahluwalia. I think very many pertinent points have made. A lot of people mentioned about sensitizing and awareness, especially amongst the young, and I think that's very important. Perhaps an idea would be to include a kind of standardized water conservation and management kind of small chapter in schools at middle school level. That might be a very good idea, because you see how effective the firecracker campaign has been among school kids. Plastics is also now being very effective, and school kids are driving the change. So I think it's very important that we bring this into the curriculum also, and perhaps that is a suggestion you could make to the authorities. The other thing I want to just, before we wind up, say is that we are trying on our best. I mean, the way you suggested that we can, all of us, take into our own hands whatever we can do. So in Habitat Center, since I've joined, we've been trying our best to conserve water. I can tell you some of the things steps we've taken in that direction. One is, of course, we've augmented our sewage treatment plant. The capacity is now vastly increased. All our horticulture is now being managed with our own treated sewage water plant. So 1 lakh liters per day less we are withdrawing from groundwater because of that. Number 2, I have had these water savers. You must have seen in all the toilets, I've put these water saving devices which reduce the consumption from taps by 50%. 5,000 liters a day we are saving just by putting that little device which costs about 80, 90 bucks into each tap. So 5,000 liters per day saving from there. I'm saying that all this is possible. For plastics, of course, I've completely banned plastic bottles here. I've said glass bottles. But, you know, these are the ways in which we can manage our environment, and we can take certain steps to do so. We are trying now to see if we can make an investment and ensure that we use only sewage treated water for the flushing pipelines also, which requires an investment from our side, because this building was not planned 22 years ago. It was planned with normal water going into our flushes. But now we'll have to make a certain investment to divert those pipelines and do that. But within the next year or 2 years maximum, I hope that all our flushed water will also be separated, and we'll use only sewage treated water for flushing. So I'm saying that each institution can also contribute. All of us can contribute. We can do this at our houses also. The other thing we want to pay attention to now is the water recharging, the point that has been made. We already have some water recharging pits, but I want to augment those also over here so that we recharge our groundwater. Already we've reduced the burden on our groundwater considerably, at least what we are using over here. So this is just by way of a footnote. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahluwalia, for a wonderful lecture and a wonderful conversation with all of us. And thank you for all of you. Your concern shows that the sensitization process is underway, and so we can find solutions together. Thank you.
Major applause to India Habitat Center.